Tom.
Team A now has 5 minutes to make its presentation. Any member of the team may speak one at a time. Team A, you'll be given reminders when there are 3 minutes and 1 minute remaining.
Thank you. Hi, we're Play to Win, and today we're going to be making the argument that Susan should use the presentation that does contain the photographs, the lynching photographs. The perspective that I would like to look at this from first is from a consequentialist perspective, and what really that means is to think about the situation in terms of cost and benefit. And I think in this situation, the benefit of showing these photographs in the classroom and properly explaining them and making sure that these kids have as good of an understanding of the country's past as possible does good for an entire group of young people growing up to become productive members of society and hopefully reconciling some of these racial tensions that the country still feels. But it's impossible to do that without proper knowledge of the past first. On the other side, we have to think about the harm done by showing these images. And I think that the harm of showing graphic images to children who are 15 or 16 years old is relatively minimal compared with the benefit, especially given that these photographs couldn't be shown in a more educational environment in a more proper way. Susan says that she would be providing historical context as well as explaining the reasons that these things are happening and explaining what is actually being seen in the images. And I think that really goes a long way to mitigating the harm of viewing graphic content. So,
building off of the consequentialist framework, the other side may argue that this wouldn't be beneficial for children to view because it could be stressful for them. But I think by holding these children to a higher standard and kind of pushing this boundary and making sure that they can handle this like responsible adults is a good exercise in itself. Again, as Tim said, building off of it in this constructive and productive environment would help them grow, not just by learning about the history itself, but as being able to accept and handle these things like responsible adults.
And I just want to talk about virtue, specifically the virtue of respect for a minute. By showing these photos, it's showing a tremendous amount of respect for the true history that did happen within the African American community and highlighting what they went through. So it's shown in a way to educate the students. It's not shown in any type of malicious way, as my team says. So by showing these images, they're doing the most good by respecting the community that was affected and by educating the children.
yeah, and I think that it's especially important that these images and this part of history be explored and explained because it's so often overlooked because it is difficult to deal with for anyone of any age. But I think making children, these teenagers, 15, 16 years old, aware that this is a part of their country's history and it's something that they should know. I think it makes it easier for them as adults later on to understand the full meaning of what that is. Anything else we wanted to say? Or? We'll yield the rest of our time. Thank you.
Thank you, Team A. Judges, please mark your scores for Team A's presentation. Team B, you now have 2 minutes to confer. Either team may take notes, but Team B is the only team allowed to speak during this time.
It's on.
Team B, you now have up to 5 minutes to make your presentation. Any member of your team may speak one at a time. Team B will be given reminders when there are 3 minutes and 1 minute remaining.
I believe like the main thrust of what I believe is the issue with showing the images to the class is the implications of the intentions of these images. They are reproductions of glorified violence as basically intended as propaganda. Their point is to strike fear. It's a tactic like that is common even now in terror attacks, is to very much glorify the violence and exaggerate the pain they inflict on others, and I think reproducing it and showing it in classrooms only tends to further their interest in that regard.
Piggybacking off what he said, the other team brought up the virtue of respect for the history of all of this, but there's also virtue of respect of the victims. The images are so graphic and like horrifying, like it can make other students feel really uncomfortable seeing that, especially African American students.
I want to answer Tim's argument about consequentialism or utilitarianism. Utilitarianism is a normative or moral theory that says that you should make a decision that creates the most happiness. And if we look at this case in particular, he says that this showing our true history will make us more cohesive, but I beg to differ that it will actually cause separation. If you look at the current climate that exists in our country, as far as the president and the political climate, right now we're at a time where we need togetherness, we don't need any more separation.
Alright, so I'm just gonna talk about a couple concerns from a bunch of different frameworks. First, I'll point out that the visual representation, or the picture itself, and the visual representations of the adolescents' heads, I'm assuming that they're thinking that this has some sort of import in terms of the educational process. That is, I think, generally understood to be probably right. However, that doesn't completely determine the argument in terms of whether or not we should allow these students to see this kind of image. Some of the background in terms of what's going on for adolescents in the United States might be helpful in trying for us to deliberate whether or not we should actually show photos of this kind. Ones that are both graphic, probably have aspects that are going to be upsetting, as the other team noted, to these children. So what is going on in the United States? Levels of anxiety and depression amongst adolescents have increased rapidly. The culture amongst adolescents has changed drastically. I mean, she says she's gonna have trigger warnings. The empirical evidence about whether or not trigger warnings even work is not particularly strong. In fact, I've seen some studies in 2015 that points in the opposite direction about whether or not trigger warnings are useful. So this is what I will suggest as a precautionary principle. The basic precaution is there are a bunch of hazards in terms of what consequential, what might happen if these images are shown. As a virtuous teacher, she has the stage, she has the command, she has the power over the students. They're all forced and compelled in a particular kind of system in order to have to spend time in a certain context. Who is she as a virtuous person, as someone who must find themselves as not only has a deontic duty towards her students, but as someone who is in a position of power? Who is she to decide that these possible visual imagery has the kind of import as a pedagogical mechanism that overrides the possible consequential downstream effects of these possible images? As Kevin pointed out, these images have been and were made in a setting that is morally flavored in a kind of a way that makes us think, well, these images were taken as propaganda, these images were taken in a way that was not respectful to the dead, and how do we represent the interests of those who are deceased? If we cannot represent the interests and cannot talk to them about how and why they want these photos, I think it is necessary to take due precaution.
I would also like to add that there's also an alternative. She has also a written out lesson plan. It doesn't include the different images. And English is such a comprehensive language that words can be written in such a way that we can make up the picture in front within our own head. So there's no need for the images and other to, plus they're being shown to people who are still minors.
Time.
Research shows that these type of images can have negative psychological effects on victims.
Thank you, Team B. Judges, please write down your scores for Team B's presentation. Team A, you have 1 minute to confer for your rebuttal. Team A is the only team allowed to speak during this time.
Time.
Team A has 2 minutes to respond to Team B's presentation. Any member of your team may speak one at a time. Team A, you will be told when you have 1 minute remaining.
All right. The first point I would like to address is actually something that Mark brought up. The idea that who is Susan to make decisions about what ought and ought not to be shown in class? She's the teacher. That's her decision to make. Susan says that when she saw those images for the first time, although they were horrible to witness, she did feel like she derived a benefit from it. And based on that, I would say that Susan still probably feels that there is benefit to be gained from showing these pictures. And in the interest of doing her job to her fullest capacity and educating the students as well as possible, I think showing the pictures is necessary.
And going off of the argument that it's exploitation to show these pictures, so if they were originally taken as souvenirs, I think that changing the message and now getting away from their message of hate that it was originally used for and using it for educational purposes that'll bring us more together and understand each other's history outweighs the issue of exploitation.
And I just want to talk about respect again and elaborate that respect is a legitimate expectation for all individuals which affects not only the community alive today, but also these people that were the victims of these crimes. And I think that it's incredibly disrespectful to choose certain histories and not others. It's not like in history class today there are absolutely no violent images in textbooks. It seems like with this example, it's cherry picking which violent crime should be in these books, and that's just a way to combat hate with ignorance. You don't want to make the children more ignorant. And it's also, as I said, there are different historical time periods which do have graphic images, and it's standard to show those in textbooks without contacting those affected because they are deceased.
Time.
Thank you. Judges, please write down your score for Team A's response. Team B, you now have 1 minute to confer for your rebuttal. Team B is the only team allowed to speak during this time. Team B has 2 minutes to respond to Team A's rebuttal. Any member of your team may speak one at a time. Team B, you will be told when you have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you. So to respond to what Tim said, I was talking about the power of her position, the ability for her to make decisions in that position, and the idea that a compulsory educational system allows her to make particular kinds of decisions in this context. It doesn't particularly matter what her experience, Tim mentioned her experience of having these images being helpful for her to understand. That's her own experience. We don't want to generalize too much to the population, but that would generally probably be the case in most instances. What we're talking about is the possibility of particular individuals to experience a negative affect as a result of allowing these visual imageries to be shown to them. As to what Allison said about the possibility that there are that certain. Oh wait, I forgot what I was about to say. So for Allison, she was talking a lot about the idea that these images are already in textbooks. It doesn't particularly. What I'm saying is that what I want to get at is the idea that she's visually presenting these images in front of the class. It's far more likely that the students are going to be presented with and have a harder time even ignoring the images. Thus, there's a difference in attention. The difference in attention changes the context. The context changes the normative considerations for how and why she should present them. She has control over this. She does not have control over the textbook. As to the idea that Amanda said that these were souvenirs, these weren't souvenirs. These were fetishized images. So.
Okay, I would like to discuss this from a deontological view or rule ethics. Pretty much stating whether this type of decision could be used as a universal rule. Showing pictures of previous victims of unjust history. If we just elucidate modern day Germany, this exact type of pictures showing victims from the Holocaust is outlawed. You cannot show any relics from Nazi Germany.
That's time up. Thank you. Judges, please write down your score for Team A's response or Team B's response. We will now have a question and answer session for the judges and the teams, beginning with Team A. The judges will collectively ask one question to each team and, if necessary, can ask one brief follow-up question to each team. Each team will have 1 minute to confer and 2 minutes to respond. Judges, would you like 30 seconds to confer, or are you ready to ask questions now?
We'll take 30 seconds.
That was recorded too. I think my horse might win. Time.
Okay,
All right, judges, you may begin.
so our question for Team A is, during 9/11, there were some pretty graphic things that happened, and we're curious about your position on whether those images should be shown in an educational setting.
We get 1 minute, right?
Oh, shit. Whoops.
I think we'll yield the rest of our time and then we're ready to answer.
Okay, Team A, you now have 2 minutes to respond to the judge's question.
So when 9/11 happened, I was in the 5th grade, and, what are you, 10 then? I would have had no idea what was happening. I wouldn't have been able to grasp the concept without the images and with my teacher. So I was in the classroom at the time when it hit, and my 5th grade teacher got up in front of class and showed us what was happening and turned on the news. And it made it real to me and made me understand why all of the adults were upset and, how I should act in accordance to the issue at hand.
And I think as someone who, I lived through 9/11 but was too young to remember much of it, I think personally, seeing those images in an educational setting allowed me to better understand the gravity of the situation and the reality of what really happened. I'm certainly grateful for having seen them. I think it's better to know than not to know.
And as somebody who's right in between their ages, I would just mirror the same things, just that specifically I felt more personally attached to what happened, having seen all of this play out, and so being able to use your sense of sight to relate and understand really helped me when I was younger. So I think that it can definitely help children, especially like older school children, understand events.
Yeah, it made it more real. It wasn't something that was disconnected from me. It was something that I could understand.
Instead of a story, it's a visual representation of history.
And we'll yield the rest of our time.
Thank you. Judges, please score Team A's responses to your question. Judges, would you like 30 seconds to confer, or are you ready to ask Team B questions now?
We'll take 30 seconds. We'll take a minute.
Am I allowed to tell them no?
We're ready.
Okay, judges, you may begin.
So our question to Team B is, does respect for the dead supersede the educational value that looking at images or violent images that depict lynchings or even things that happened on 9/11? So does respect for the dead supersede the need for those types of images to be shown?
Team B, you'll have 1 minute to confer. All right. Team B, you now have up to 2 minutes to respond to the judge's question.
We say for this particular case that showing the images does not override the educational value, simply because the context in which they were taking. They were taking as souvenirs, and they were taken to humiliate and degrade a certain segment of people. It is this type of exact images that depict feelings of lesser value or inequality to African Americans today, because it's showing a part of history where we were powerless and we didn't have a voice in society, and we weren't able to benefit from the equal rights that all the other citizens in America deserve. This is glorifying the exact thing what American is based on. We're based on an egalitarian society where we're all equal, and these pictures were taken at a time where we weren't, and certain people were viewed as animals and others were viewed as humans.
We would like to clarify that respect for the dead is not our only point with not showing these images. It's the fact that these images represent very much the propaganda, the spread fear among blacks. That was the original intention of taking these images for many of these white supremacists. And for that, it really is harmful to continue to propagate them because it spreads the same fear that they intended to cause back when they took them back in the 1800s. And I would like Mark to finish.
So, I thank everyone for being here first, but I think having a great time. But let me first say, in regards to what they were saying, and back it up a little bit, I think that the idea, you asked a kind of a general question, and I just want to say this is a particular case. In general, I don't want to say the interests of the dead, that there's no educational value in violent imagery at all. That wasn't our case at all. That wasn't what we were trying to get at. We were talking about this particular case.
Thank you. Judges, please score Team B's responses to your questions.
I have a follow-up question, actually.
Absolutely.
So, stepping away from this case for a moment, thinking about the question that we asked, right? So we know that we are in a time of Black Lives Matter, when we should be post-racial and enjoy the equal protections of the law across the board, right? So your argument of this was related to not having equal protections under the law, not having rights. So we know that that's not the case today, right? Ideally, that's not the case today, right? So how does that change, if at all, the argument that you make about the importance of visual images that depict young men shot on the street today?
Yeah, I feel like those images should also be omitted from the newspaper, because I feel like it glorifies the police culture that exists within this country. To show people, the victims of people that are essentially getting away with murder is just wrong if you look at that from a virtuous standpoint.
Thank you.
Thank you. Judges, please score Team B's responses to your questions. Thank you to both teams for a great round. Teams, you can relax for a few minutes while we collect the cases and scrap paper. Judges, will you please use this time to write your final score and vote for each team on your tally sheet.
At least my horse won. My hands are hurting.
That's actually helpful. That's actually quite clear.
I'll take the monitor script.
We have everybody's scores though.
Yeah. On the corner.
May I have everyone's attention? The judges will now announce the results. Remember that the winner will be the team that has the highest number of judges' votes out of 3. Before we begin, let's thank the judges. Will the judges please announce their vote?
I'm not sure how you want us to do this. Do you want us to announce the score? Do you want us to announce the winning team?
Just the winning team.
Just the winning team.
So the judges are unanimous in picking Team A as the winning team.
So Team A has won the match. Congratulations to both teams, and thank you for a great match.
Judges, do you have any feedback for our teams?
No, I think they did a wonderful format. I mean, this is the first time I'm judging a debate like this, but I mean, this is an annual thing, so